So Ben, I know you're particularly interested in AI and you know, where that's leading us. What are your thoughts, particularly from the perspective of, you know, maybe from the perspective of physics? I've heard that, you know, for example, physics, because some, at least in some fields of physics, you know, you have these very large papers with many authors. Perhaps, do you think that builds in any kind of resistance to this kind of issue?
Oh, that's
large
a
team
big
science?
question. Look, it's a topic I'm very passionate about in general. For a number of reasons, I have been serving as an editor-in-chief of a journal for 15 years, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But I also, as Pro-Vice-Chancellor, have courage of research integrity. So I live and breathe it at this institution, so I understand the integrity landscape here in Australia and at the institution. I guess I wanted to make 2 points. I'll come back to the AI, but I mean, speaking to physics, it's interesting because on the one hand, there's part of me that says, well, at least in physics, we have principles and equations and maths that guides us, and we work very hard to use those equations, and it's different to these life sciences. But then I'm reminded of my experience at Bell Labs, where I was for 7 years, and there was probably what could be described as the scientific fraud of the century. And you would know the story of Hendrik John, who was a young scholar working on his own in a lab at Lucent Technologies at the time on what would be, you know, what then was groundbreaking. He had 3 Nobel Prizes lined up, and he was publishing in Nature and Science and Physics Review letters, and this guy was just a machine. And then it turned out he was discovering new fields of physics, single molecule electronics, really setting up the 21st century in a way that we hadn't imagined. And it turned out it was all fraudulent science. It was just devastating for the field. Absolutely, it was incredibly damaging for scientific integrity. It took years and years and years, I think, to rebuild confidence. And I think the whole scientific publishing paradigm has changed, and you would be familiar with many of the changes now in publications. You have to put attributions to authors, and I think the editorial process and the peer review has improved. So I'm not sure physics is any different, therefore. I'd like to think it is, but it's not any different. I think, and I'm not sure that having 150 authors guarantees anything. I have no evidence, but I'm not sure. But what I would say is that AI is coming in at great pace. I mean, we've had Gen AI, it's taken off in the last 18 months. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it will transform and accelerate our business, our world. And so I talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of AI. But I was in a conversation last week that speaks to this particular issue because I'm an editor-in-chief, and we had our annual editor-in-chief meeting, which is usually in New York, and it was a meeting 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. every morning for a week. Editors-in-chief and publishers from all over the world, and the topic was AI in publishing. And so that editorial publishing ecosystem is grappling with how do we manage our business with AI. And so it speaks to the notion that authors are using AI to write their papers. So what are the guardrails there? We've got reviewers using AI to review the papers. That's fascinating. So we're already busy. It's pretty tempting to just take the abstract, the first page, and pump it into ChatGPT 4.0 and say, please draft me a relatively positive reviewer report
Relatively
for this
positive.
manuscript, and you'd be surprised how sophisticated the response is. And then there's the notion of AI accelerating the editorial process. So the editorial process can look for images, it can look for the quality of the manuscript. There's even the fascinating and pretty scary notion that the editorial process can be, the decision-making process can be influenced by AI. And I mean, it all begs the question, how do you train these AI algorithms to do that in a robust, ethical way? So we're kind of going around in circles, and you very quickly kind of end up in the Terminator because the AI is doing the research, writing the grants, submitting the papers, reviewing the papers, editorial process, and it's like, where is the human in the loop? So look, there's a lot happening. I actually think that in spite of what you've said, that on average, I think the scientific, what I see here in Australia at the University of Sydney, I think on average, it's not happening that often, but I'd love to unpack that, and I'd love to unpack exactly how often and what does it mean to say fake. But we have a pretty robust integrity framework. here at the University of Sydney and in the country that I think is looking, proactively, and I think, as we've sort of echoed, at the same time, relentlessly committed to the culture change and the education and training that's required, particularly with our early career researchers and students. So I very openly talk about this Henrik Schoen saga. His lab was next door to mine. I would see him walking the corridors of Bell Labs with the New Jersey Star-Ledger as they were filming this guy and putting him on the front page of the New York Times. I would have lunch with this guy, and I saw the damage that did to science. So, so that is just a quick perspective.
And interestingly, I think his fraud was actually first detected through image analysis.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
someone literally, a simpler version, someone literally looked at a figure, and I can tell you a bit of a backstory here. This is not widely known, but someone literally said, well, that noise over here looks pretty similar to the noise over there. Now, the backstory that's really fun, because I know colleagues opposite Bell Labs, back in the day when Word documents that were being written would have embedded in them the actual data that was being used in the images and the figures. This is using the old package Origin. Remember Origin data packaging? So the data was sitting in the file. So they were actually retrospectively able to go back and look at these Word documents and stare at the data up to 9 significant figures and say, well, hang on, all this data over here to 9 significant figures is the same data that sits over here. That was back in 2001. And so it all crumbled, and this guy disappeared and had his PhD taken off him.
Yeah, and there's a fantastic book written about
Yes.
it. Plastic Fantastic.
It is. It's a great
read.
It's a great
Yeah.
read.
Very
Plastic
good
Fantastic.
book.
My name doesn't get mentioned in it. Just to be
I've read it.
I'm
I've,
sorry.
I've read it, and I didn't notice you in it, Ben. But
The
I,
writer
yeah,
is Eugenie
Yeah.
Reich.
Eugenie
That's right.
Reich.
It's a great
That's
read.
right. Yes.